Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back to Lecture 7, in which we will conclude our Introduction to Tassawuf series. So this is going to be the conclusion, and perhaps maybe, I'm not sure as I'm speaking right now, but perhaps on the shorter side. What is the actual path? What are the components of the path? We've been talking about Tassawuf, we've been talking about these lofty ideas, we've been talking about some of the goals, some of the principles, some of the things that you experience, etc. So here it's a practical discussion. How do you actually do it? Well, there needs to be a sheikh, there needs to be a teacher, and there needs to be the aspirant, the murid, the student, the one who is seeking, i.e. us, and there needs to be a path itself. It goes without saying. Now, before I answer or I kind of delve into that, one question that you'll find in the literature of Islam, and indeed a question that people ask, is taking a path obligatory? Is it necessary? So the way to answer that is Tasawwuf is obligatory, because that comes from the hadith of Gabriel. You have to polish your heart, you have to work on yourself, you have to remove the bad traits, you have to adorn yourself with the good traits, you have to have a massive portion of ihsan in your life for your Islam to be complete. That part is obligatory. Do you have to do it in this formal way? Technically, no, but it's going to be almost impossible to do it unless you do it in a formal way, because how are you going to know what the pitfalls are? How are you going to know how to protect yourself? So I answered in that way, so sort of like tongue-in-cheek, because if you listen to what I just said, you're going to conclude, well, you have to do it formally. Technically, there are people in the past that are okay on their own. They have their dhikr, they have their Quran, they have their prayers on the Prophet ﷺ, and they're looking at something like Al-Ghazali's Ihya, and they're going methodologically, book by book, and they're trying to implement it. You can get a lot of advancement, spiritual advancement that way. But to have the full experience, the experience of the people before us, it's going to be very difficult without the formality that we're going to discuss. And the reason is that this is just like any other subject: fiqh, nahu, grammar, sarf, morphology, tafsir, hadith, ilm al-kalam, usul al-fiqh, so on and so forth. All of the disciplines and the sciences that we study in the seminary, in the Sharia colleges, we can't do those without a teacher. I mean, technically, I guess you could pick up a book and try to make heads or tail of it on your own. But realistically, practically speaking, you're going to need a teacher. And this is really the same thing. So that's why I answered it in that way. Now, of course, the path that we talk about, we mentioned before in past lectures, that there is only one path, and that is to follow the book of Allah and the example laid before us by the best of creation, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, there can be no path outside of that. But there are different flavors, there are different experiences, there are different combinations of adhkar and meditative practices that are distinct in each of the different paths, the different orders. But please remember that they are all predicated on the same base. And that's the famous statement that I said, is that the path is one, and any ignorance that we experience and that we perceive is from the ignorance, any difference is from the ignorance of the murids, of the followers. So the path's got to be orthodox, has to have proper praxis, has to have proper belief, orthodoxy. We talked about that, linking it back to the first lecture, the hadith of Gabriel alayhi salam. And then there is, you have to have the right intention. Oftentimes we forget about that. It's not simple. Sometimes people are in a swoon because of the glitter and the glory of the sheikh, and he's very popular, and I've been following them online, and now I get to see them, and I'm just sort of starstruck by that person. That's very, very dangerous, because that's not what this is about. This is about you being the best version of yourself. Whether this sheikh has a gazillion followers and verified accounts, or whether he's virtually unknown and just sort of hidden amongst people, is irrelevant. What matters is that you can benefit from this person for yourself. So the sheikh, the way I like to talk about it, is the sheikh in a sense stands behind you and is sort of has like a flashlight and is guiding you. Oh, look out, look, you see here, look out there, turn here. Very much in the same way as when Gabriel took the Prophet ﷺ on the Isra and the Mi'raj, which is a very important kind of link, and I almost am a little upset that I didn't make it earlier in some of the earlier lectures. But there is no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ is superior to Gabriel, is superior to anything and everything in the created universe. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's one of our core beliefs about Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. But yet, he did not know that specific path. So Gabriel is telling him, okay, get on the buraq, okay, do this, look here, don't look here, pray 2 rakahs here, do this, do that. He's guiding him. But that does not mean that the one being guided is less than the guide. In this case, there's a limit to that, allegory or to that example. Of course, you are not going to be as, in the beginning, as spiritually proficient as the sheikh, but maybe one day you will be, and you'll go on and do great things and be a beacon of light to other people. But the reason I use that example is, think of the sheikh as a coach, kind of standing behind you. Do this, don't do this. Oh, look out here. Be careful. In 10 steps, there's going to be this, branch or twig. You can everyone twist their ankle here. Move a little bit to the left, sides, so on and so forth. And that's really what the path is like. So your intention is to be guided, not for anything of the dunya, not for any worldly purposes. And of course, for the sheikh to be a sheikh, he has to be licensed, authorized to do what he's doing. And I'm going to give you a drop-down list of some of the kind of meta principles to think about and how to find the right person to guide you. There are 5 points, and this is a summary of a lot of the literature, summary of how I was taught, summary of how we approach this in our own specific order. And hopefully this can be of a benefit to anybody out there that's searching. I make no calls to myself or to our tariq or to our sheikh or anything like that, because there has to be, as you'll see shortly, there has to be a little bit of magic between you and this path, or you and the person that's going to guide you. There has to be a type of relationship that you can build on. And not everybody that's a valid sheikh, and not every murid who's an honest murid are necessarily compatible, just like people are not compatible in life. So this is just a sketch of sort of meta principles to help guide you. The first thing is that we always want to choose a path, an order that is closest to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There are Sufi practices, while valid from a Sharia point of view, they're a little bit exaggerated, let's say. Or some of them have even developed non-Sunni practices, non-Sunnah practices, I mean. I don't mean Sunni in the Sunni Shia sense, I mean non-Sunnah based practices. Yeah, it exists, and there are people that will make, in the past you read about them, they'll make their murids do all these very extreme things as a way of disciplining them. So we might, if we were looking at it from the fatwa point of view, be like, okay, there's nothing haram about that, but that's not the style of the Prophet ﷺ. That's not exactly how he dealt. He was very soft-spoken with his companions, ﷺ, loving and easygoing with them. Allah Ta'ala addresses him, لَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were rough and tough with people, they would have left. So we always want to remember that the Prophet ﷺ is our example. How can we get the closest to how he was functioning? And what I mean by the closest of the sunnah, of course there's the exterior sunnah, which is important and we will never negate, but there's also the interior sunnah. In other words, how he acted and how he functioned and how he talked and how he looked or didn't look at people and how he addressed problems or didn't address problems, etc., how he dealt with his family and his friends, his enemies, everything, alayhi salatu wasalam. The internal disposition, the hal, the state of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So we're always going to look for a path that emphasizes that very overtly. Of course, all of the paths are supposed to, but as I said, just to be honest, there are some paths that have a little bit of a little bit of a departure for whatever reasons, and they might be valid from a Sharia point of view, but they're not closest. We're looking for the closest. That's number one. Number two, any sheikh of a path, or any muqaddim of that sheikh by extension, has to have an unbroken chain of transmission back to the Prophet ﷺ. There is no Tassawuf without this chain of transmission. There is no spiritual advancement without this chain of transmission. There is no learning, in fact, any of the sciences without that chain of transmissions. And none other than Abdullah ibn Mubarak, from the great of the Salaf, he says, as radiallahu anhu, as is recorded in the introduction of Sahih Muslim by Imam Muslim himself, al-isnadu min ad-din wa lawla al-isnadu laqala man sha'a ma sha'a. These chains of transmission are from our religion, and were it not for these chains of transmission, anyone can say what they want. So for us to adduce anything and have it to be authoritative in Islam, whether it be the exterior sciences or whether it be the rational sciences or whether it be the spiritual discipline of tasawwuf, it has to be with that chain of transmission, and with that comes the permission. So usually these are verbal pronouncements of the sheikh, and nowadays there's like a lot of videos. I mean, I'm not really for that. I like the traditional, give me a piece of paper that's stamped and, kind of notarized. That's sort of, at least that's how we do it in our tariq, let's say. Okay, and I have those papers for those of you who are wondering. And number three, we look for a path that's easy. Of the Prophet ﷺ, as narrated in Abu Dawood radiallahu anhu, never was given a decision between two options except that he chose the easiest of those decisions as long as there was no sin involved. So there are orders that are tough. You're praying hundreds of rak'ahs, you're doing several hours of dhikr, and for some people they need that and that's great. For some people it's just very difficult. I mean, our life is so involved in work and family and parents and social obligations, and I can barely, alhamdulillah, I can pray the 5 prayers and some of the sunnahs before and after, but the dhikr has got to be something that's manageable. So each person also seeks to find the easiest of the path, because that itself is guided by the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes I refer to it as air-conditioned Islam, or in Arabic I say ad-dala. We have to be pampered. So we're looking for a path that will pamper us. The sheikh will be easy with you. Sometimes some people find our path difficult. So this is a relative. I mean, I don't, obviously, because I'm on it and I'm doing it, alhamdulillah. But sometimes people are like, oh, that dhikr is that wazifa that you read in the morning is just too long. The adhkar of the sabah and the masa. Okay, then find something that's easier. But I mean, that's what we got. So you're always going to look for something that's easier. Number 4, so that's number 3. Number 4, it's important to find, and these are more, the last 3 are maybe more traditional principles. 4 and 5 are kind of a little bit more of a modern flavor. Number 4 is you need to find a path that's accessible to you. The books and the publications of the path are easy. Maybe there's an app. Some turuq have an app. We have an app in Arabic. It's not the best app, but it's an app nonetheless. And a lot of people in the Arab world use the app, or at least in Egypt, I think. I don't know I think it's only in Egypt. No, sorry, it is a universal app. But with apps, they got to be updated. I don't use the app, as you can tell, but I have it and I look at it from time to time when I'm asked to. I think the Ba'alawis also have an app. So some people have an app. Some people, I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I like the little booklets and like my little folded dhikr, and I have my tasbih, my actual tasbih with me. A lot of people like that little thing on the finger. I'm not one of those people, but whatever. I'm getting off on a tangent. The point is that it needs to be accessible. You have to be able to read about the order, the books about the order. So in our case, the Shadhiliyya, we have a rich literature. And most of these books, not all of them, but most of them are published. Most of them you can download as PDF. Many of them, not a lot, but many of them are even translated into English. Like I think I've mentioned before, the books of Ibn Ata'illah, radiallahu anhu, who's in our silsila, are translated into English. I myself translated the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah, radiallahu anhu. Some of the books of Ahmed al-Zarruq, radiallahu anhu, are now being published and being translated. So, you want that. You want something that you can kind of have access to it. And with that comes access to the people of the path, whether it's the sheikh himself or whether it's a muqaddim or a khalifa or something like that. But there's got to be somebody that you can follow up with, somebody that you can, if you have questions, that you can ask. And in fact, this whole channel is our way and my way of reaching out and trying to be accessible. And then number 5, and perhaps one of the often times overlooked aspects, is there has to be a relationship between you and the sheikh. There has to be some compatibility. Just because the sheikh has all of the previous things, check. You have a good intention, you're on the right path, check. There might not be that compatibility. And how do you know is when you try. When you do the dhikr and you try, and then, it's very difficult for you to stick with it, even though it's simple. You're not seeing any benefit. That's fine. It just means that's not your path. Then you find another path. And that's very important for people. Maybe in another video we'll talk about bay'ah, because there are these common misconceptions about tasawwuf that are perpetrated by the people of tasawwuf themselves. But this allegiance, and if you're locked in, not locked in, I'll pump that for another video. But until you have an opening, that path is not your path. When you have that opening, that's your path. That means there's no going back. That means not in like a mafia way. There's no going back because khalas, Allah's given you that opening, that gift. You're consistent with the dhikr, khalas, then you just stay with that until the rest of your life, and you just follow that path until your earthly end, and inshallah that will give you the benefits in this world and in the hereafter. If you don't, and you can't find these things that we've just mentioned, the standard advice is that you increase your prayers on the Prophet ﷺ at least 300 times a day, maybe 300 to 500 times a day, and that becomes your guide until Allah Ta'ala puts in front of you the right type of person. Hopefully this is helpful for all of you to this lecture and indeed this series. I hope to do more content for the channel, inshallah. Of course, you can always reach out to me on social media. For right now, the social media handle that I'm using is just my own one, Making Sense of Islam, because it's very difficult for me to have social media accounts for everything. If you have suggestions or topics you'd like me to cover, let me know, and we'll put a pin in it here. Thank you for watching these videos. I hope they were of benefit. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.